So good morning everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Children's, Families and Community Select Committee here at Norfolk County Council. My name is Brian Long, I'm the chair of this committee and I'm pleased to see you all here today. This meeting is being held in person at County Hall and is also being streamed live on the County Council's YouTube channel. We're not expecting a fire alarm test today, but if the alarm does sound, we must evacuate County Hall. And in the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest exit and meet on the muster point located in the main car park out the front. Start with item 1, which is to receive apologies for absence and to note any substitute members. Megan, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies today from Chris Allen, who is now the new Church of England Diocese representative from Paul Dunning.
Thank you. And membership-wise, we're all present and correct, which is great. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting, which was held back on the 14th of November. Am I okay to sign those as a true copy? Accurate record. Thank you. And item 3, members to declare any interests on items presented on the agenda. Any declarations at all? Not. Oh, yes, sorry, I've got Leslie Bambridge first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to try and remember what I'm involved with, but I am on the Museums Committee and I wrote it down earlier. No, I've forgotten. There's something else, but sorry, the adoption panel. Do forgive me. Yes, I'm a panel member for the adoption panel.
Of course, yeah. And Councillor Smith-Clare, Mike, please.
Thanks, Brian. With regards to young people home education, I run my own community training provider.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So there. Oh, and Councillor Ward.
Yes, thank you. I'm chairman of the Norfolk Joint Museums Committee and also chairman and director of the Norfolk Museums Development Foundation.
Charitable trust that runs separate to you. Okay, they will all be noted, thank you. Updates from myself. I'd like to make members aware that following the committee's agreement to write a joint letter with our cabinet member to the Department for Education regarding the funding of special schools in Norfolk, we received a response on the 5th of January and I've ensured that this response has been shared with members of the committee. As members will be aware from the letter, and following the briefing on the 22nd of December, Norfolk has been allocated a capital funding provision, and the government has indicated that that funding can either be used to build our planned special schools or to increase the high needs placements in mainstream settings. And so ultimately that will be a decision that's taken by Cabinet, but due to the significant interest from members of this committee, I propose that during the work programming section, we arrange an additional meeting so that we can discuss whether that, our suggestion and find the detail as whether that money is allocated to the special schools which it was originally outlined for, or whether we look to recommend that it's spent increasing high needs within normal, ordinary school settings. If that's agreeable with everyone, we'll deal with that when we come to the work programming session. All okay? Excellent. So that was the only update from myself. We have no public questions from members of the public, but we have had circulated to you all a question from Councillor Maxfield, which was actually on the subject of what we were just discussing with my update. And the question, has all members had that circulated, Megan? They've all had the question circulated and the response to that. And I think that probably Ed will, I don't know if you have a supplementary, but hopefully in the programming session and the additional meeting that will all come to the fore. Okay, excellent, thank you. Which moves us then onwards to the item 7, which is Norfolk Museum Service and its work with children and families. We're fortunate today, we've got our portfolio holder with us, and of course one of our committee members is chair of the Norfolk Museums Committee. But Councillor Dewsbury, I'll come to yourself first, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to do the introduction with regard to recommendation 1, and then John will do the introduction with regard to recommendation 2. Okay? So Norfolk Museum Service is a joint museum service covering the whole of Norfolk, supported by the City and District Councils and led by Norfolk County Council. The service receives significant levels of funding from the Arts Council England, mainly for its role as an Arts Council England national portfolio organisation. The service also works with Brighton and Hove Museums to run the South East Museum Development Programme across the South East region, as well as running our 10 museums and the Shire Hall Study Centre in Norfolk. In our museums, the service is responsible for the long-term care of around 3 million objects, many of which are of national importance. The service has also assisted the Borough Council of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk to develop the Guildhall project in Kings Lynn, helped North Norfolk District Council to deliver the Deep History Coast programme, and worked with Broadland and South Norfolk councils to support their Friendly Invasion project. All this, as well as completing the Royal Palace Reborn project at the Castle Museum and working in partnership with the British Museum to create the Gallery of Medieval Life, which is also in the castle. Although the service plays a key role in supporting tourism and the local economy, its major role is in promoting our culture and heritage and ensuring children of all ages get the chance to learn about our history, and adults get the opportunity to be reminded and show their children of what life was like in the past. So that's the introduction to the first recommendation. John, as chairman of the Joint Museums Committee, is going to tell you all about the work we're doing with children from early years to late teens.
Thank you, Margaret. John, can I come to you next, please?
Thank you, and thank you, Margaret. I'd like to talk about the museum's work with children and young people, something I've had the pleasure to see at first hand over my many years as chair of the Museums Committee. The report sets out 6 areas where the museum service is active in supporting children and young people across Norfolk, from the very young to the older children and young people, including many of our looked-after children. Unlike many other local authority museums, even those in large cities, Norfolk Museums has dedicated programmes for early years and families at many of its museums. The new facilities at Norwich Castle, created as part of the Royal Palace Reborn project, are a great example of this work. The Museum Service has recently received funding from the National Endowment for Science, Technology and Arts to support this ongoing work. I've been very involved with the museum's Kick the Dust project, and I've enjoyed speaking with many of the young people involved over the years. The programme is of national importance, and you can see from the report that there has been a big impact on many thousands of young people who have been involved, helping to build their skills and confidence, and in many cases help them to find rewarding and enjoyable jobs. In terms of school visits, the service is one of the most valued museums in the country, beyond the National Museum in London. I've had the great pleasure of attending the events where museums have been awarded the Sanford Awards for Excellence in Education, reflecting the quality of the school's programmes which we run. Finally, I must add that the Museum Service has supported Norfolk Fostering Service and foster families for many years. Our annual Family Fun Day at Weston Hall Farm and Workhouse, for example, has been running for more than 20 years and currently attracts several hundred members of foster families each summer. I firmly believe that the Museum Service has had a huge impact on the lives of many thousands of Norfolk children and young people over the decades, and I'm looking forward to hearing the reflections of members of the committee, as well as listening to any ideas you have on how the Museum Service can work even more closely with Norfolk County Council members and officers to support our children and young people in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, John. From the chair, thank you for the work that you do on the Museums Committee, because you're a stalwart for what you do. So thank you for that. I'll just come to officers. We've got Steve Miller here, who's the Lead Director for Communities Environment, Joe War, Head of Development, and Jan Pittman, Learning Manager for Norwich Museums. We haven't got a presentation, but is there anything you wish to add to the introduction that we've had from Margaret and John?
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Margaret and John for the summary and the introduction. Hopefully members of the committee found the paper interesting. It is quite top level, and we've tried to break it down into sort of 6 easy areas to look at. So we would love to hear your thoughts, reflections, and any questions you might have for Jan, Joe and myself, particularly focused on the work of children and young people and how we can possibly do even more over the future years. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, right, I've got hands up already and I've not started to make any notes yet. Now, I really don't know who was first. I'm going to go Maxine.
Gosh, thank you. I just wanted to, I've got something really positive about the museum service that I wanted to share. I'm a governor at Earlham Nursery School, and they are one of your partners with the Mini Wonders initiative, and it's such a positive and appreciated scheme, and it makes the world of difference to some of the families and children who go to the nursery. And I just asked the head teacher yesterday as I was with her just if she had anything she wanted to add. So if it's okay, I'll just share with you what she said. That as a whole organisation, you're incredibly welcoming, you're flexible, warm, and you offer a genuine opportunity and commitment to opening the museum service to the wider community. And you know, it's such a valued service for, you know, some families that wouldn't otherwise probably experience the museum in the way that they're able to. So it's massively appreciated and is, you know, such a positive thing. So thank you. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask if there, you know, if that's something that's going to be continuing, you know, or expanded, and also whether I also hear really good things about Kick the Dust, and whether there are opportunities potentially for working with specialist schools in a similar way to, you know, broaden that perspective, and because sometimes those places can be, you know, tricky for some of those pupils to go to on a regular day, and so whether that's something that you've looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb, and thank you for your and Carol's kind comments. I would just in terms of Earlham Nursery, we think they're amazing as well. So just for councillors, the Mini Wonders project is a project funded by Art Fund and Nesta, and the aim is to test across on a national scale the extent to which museums can assist and support caregivers with their relationships with children, specifically focused upon areas of greatest deprivation. So there's 8 lead museums, and now we've got 8 partner museums, and our partner is Gresnell Farmer Workhouse, so we're doing two within the museum service. We're just about to start, there's 6 cohorts in total, and we're about to start the 5th cohort, so there'll be one more known as summer one. And what Art Fund and Nesta, in consultation with us, are currently thinking about is how to scale it up. So what we're trying to do as a service is to ensure that we're part of that conversation, and if we can support that national rollout in any way. So first of all, they've got to do their evaluation. Nesta, that's their primary focus of the project, to do the evaluation. Once they've done the evaluation of the impact, which I think they will find is extremely positive across the country, then we'll see how we can roll that out. Because, I mean, we certainly think it's been a very significant programme. I think for us, it's been an interesting example of how we can move into more, if you like, parenting, using heritage and culture as a part of promoting positive parenting. So we've learned a lot from it, and we hope that it will be able to be scaled up, and we'll be part of that conversation. As part of, as far as the question about Kick the Dust, we do already work with a number of special schools as part of Kick the Dust, and we'd like to develop that. So in Kings Lynn, for instance, we're working closely with a number of, with a special school and some young people as well, and it's been a very successful way. As you said, you're quite right to identify the barriers to access, and also I think the way that museums offering a safe space is a way of encouraging. You know, we're very good, I think I can say, at providing a safe space from which people can explore and develop both an understanding of the past, but I think more significantly those sort of work skills and experience which then can lead on to other things, whether it's in heritage or not.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Adams, Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, there's so much depth to the work that's being done here, and well, I'm a real fan of the museum service anyway, so really welcome the report, and thank you to the cabinet member and to Councillor Ward, who's a real champion for museums and cultural activity across the county, for coming to speak to us on this. Given we operate 10 museums across a very rural county, what specific outreach is being funded for families in cultural deserts who might not be able to afford transport and access to locations like Norwich Castle Museum? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll start off. So I'd say we're really fortunate that the 10 museums in our study centre are pretty evenly geographically spread out across the county. So the starting point, I think, is that most of our communities are within reasonably easy distance of one of our 10 museums. Focus obviously in Norwich and Great Yarmouth in terms of 3 museums in each of those, but King's Lynn, Cromer, Dereham, and Thetford. The way we approach the services, we should be doing our very best at every opportunity to deliver a comprehensive county-wide service. So that's the way we sort of think of it. And the opportunities, 3 of which were mentioned in the introduction, are that we tend to sort of step beyond the walls of the museum however and whenever we're asked to, particularly by our district partners. So if there's a project, if there's a set of initiatives, we've worked in market towns, we've worked in libraries, we've worked in community centres on many occasions, and particularly through things like Voices from the Workhouse, the big project redevelopment that we did at Gresson Hall a few years ago. We've worked in care homes, dementia cafes, etc. We're very mindful that people still face barriers to accessing our services. Some of those are things like transport, paying for school transport, and Jan might want to come in a moment in terms of particularly how we approach access to all our schools and young people through the schools programme. But if we can find a way to reduce a barrier, and obviously in terms of admission and entry, we do lots of things that are very targeted and focused on the people we think we most need to work with and most can benefit, sometimes through formal programmes like Kick the Dust, and sometimes it's through free days like the Open Farms weekend and the National Lottery free weekends and things like that, Heritage Open Days, etc. So it's a mixed approach. We always love to know if you think there's a particular community or school or group that would really benefit from our services and accessing that, and we're not able to do that, so we'll find a way to try and resolve that and welcome those community members and schools and young people. Well, I'll pass over to Jan, who might have a particular thought or two on particularly schools access.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. It's it's a really pertinent question, and one which is becoming more so. And I think we recognise keenly that it is a barrier to entrance, both for schools, for some schools, and also for families as well. But as I think Steve sort of mentioned, we try to target it as much as we can. What I would say would be that, in terms of schools now, because of the increasing cost of coach transport, so the way that the school works, all Norfolk schools have free entry for a self-led visit, but we do charge for ones where we have staff facilitating because there's a staff cost incurred. The cost of the total visit, about 2/3 of it will be coach transport if they travel. Coming back to Councillor Webb's question about the Mini Wonders project, one of the main costs for that project is for coach transport from the Earlham estate to ensure that those families can have access. So we are very, very keenly aware of it. As Steve mentioned, we try to do everything we can to balance it by offering free offers elsewhere. So, for instance, we have a family at the Castle Museum. We have a family an earlier Saturday, every second and fourth Saturday, and we target areas of the city and settings with greater deprivation to offer free family tickets for those. So although we may not be able to help with the transport, we can help with the entrance.
I've got Mike next. Councillor Smith-Clare.
Thanks, Brian. Firstly, I love you. Your museums are superb. Yeah, I come from Brighton, lived in London, and their museums were good, but there's nothing like the museums in Norfolk. So everyone, please, big pats on the back. And that's not just based on my perspective, it's based on working with projects that have always been made incredibly welcome. Marginalised members of the community that have crossed the threshold. My kids have experienced everything from potato picking at Gressenhall through to dressing up as Romans down at the Time and Tide. Literally, you've made education and local history come alive, and that innovation and that continuing series of accessible opportunities, huge praise. You also, Brian, asked for some suggestions, and again, from the past, I know that they are always taken on board. And there's just a few I was thinking of. You've got cracking links with schools. Have you ever considered a young school museums champion programme, where what you have is champions that then can continue that enthusiasm within the school settings? So they are almost the conduit of what's taking place, whether it be the brilliant, and I sound a bit sad, but the Miffy exhibition that's taking place in Yarmouth, which was phenomenal. A lot of the time it's not knowing what's going on. And if you have that champion network, I think that would be hugely effective. The other thing is, one of the most successful programs to get young people to read is the Book Tokens program. Is there an opportunity, again, linking up to schools and a wide range of settings, not just traditional, but home education settings, where museum tokens could be, given, and they are then exchanged for a visit. And I know the logistics of that can be really hard, but maybe that could fit within an annual National Norfolk Museum Celebration Day, where, again, that outward-facing celebration could link up to the use of those tokens. And then the final point, and it's a final suggestion, I remember working with the Ancient House in Thetford, and the local schools around there, again, are indicators of huge areas of deprivation and sometimes that lack of movement into what was seen as being a stuffy, completely unreasonable stuffy sort of like setting. They ran small school-based exhibitions of projects that were then transferred over into the museum setting. And what better way than to get families to come along than to see their kids' work, whether it be photos, art that linked to curriculum areas, but more importantly, celebrated the local history. So again, thank you, and please extend that to the team and the wonderful work that's done, but there's some suggestions.
Mike, thank you. I very much like your suggestion of museum tokens, and the champion idea is good too. You youngsters dressing up as Romans, I wondered if you found out what they did for us, but with the name Brian, I have to be very careful going down that road. Officers, any thoughts or comments on Mike's suggestions to you?
Thank you, Councillor, for your very kind words, and hopefully I can reassure you that I think that we can respond to your suggestions and are doing so partly already. So, for example, with the schools champions, I think that's a really excellent idea. We do have some young people's groups who I think are doing that informally at the moment already through Kick the Dust and our Young Heritage Collective at Thetford in particular, but I think we could look to formalise that some more and give them a sort of official title, so that's a good suggestion. In terms of the tokens, I'm pleased to report that we have boxes full of vouchers in my office that we are very generous in terms of allocating to community groups, and we have something called Grab a Grown Up voucher, which goes to every child who visits, because for many of these children this may be their first exposure to a museum, And so they get a Grab a Grown Up voucher at the end of their visit to the, as part of their school visit, to encourage them to come back with their family and to sort of build a more, kind of sustained engagement with their heritage. And there are vouchers that go to lots of different groups through Kick the Dust, young people in supported living, all sorts of different groups. So we're very keen to encourage that. And then I think your last point about the, bringing families in to see their young people's work, again, absolutely really important thing that we do like to do. We have a community gallery in Time and Tide, which you may have seen, which is a very dedicated space where young people and community groups can work to develop artistic, creative responses to their visits, and then it is displayed so that they can bring their families in to see their work. But that's an example at Time and Tide, and I think you're right that we could probably think about how we expand that across our 10 sites more regularly.
Thanks very much.
And if I can just add briefly to what Joe said there, I think the idea of a day which is highlighted as basically bringing in your tokens, I think that's an extremely important, excellent idea, because we do recognise just giving out tokens doesn't get rid of all barriers to entry. And that might be financial ones, but equally it might be social and cultural ones. And one of those ones which we found in terms of our family Saturdays and our early years Saturdays in Norwich is that knowing that everybody is going together on that day helps everyone overcome that barrier. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. You want to come back? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quickie on that one. And again, it's not always just the cultural barriers. I'm just thinking of my kids and the fact that they'll go along, they'll be given a token, and like any other note that they're given at school, it's lost.
I mean, one of the great, obviously, when it comes to a family Saturday, we're obviously very flexible also. And if families have lost their tickets, we let them in anyway.
Excellent, thank you. I haven't seen any other hands up from committee members. I've got Councillor Fisher. Oh, Tim, you want to come in first? Yeah, I'll come back to you. No. I'll go back to you, Tim, please. Yeah.
Sorry, John. Okay, so the committee heard last time, it was in the minutes, that the museum budget savings involve staff adjustments. So will those adjustments result in reduced opening hours or loss of staff who lead on any of this work or the workshops aimed at children and young people?
Thank you, Councillor. Like most service areas, we do look very carefully at the costs. We control them as carefully as possible and collectively put forward proposals for consideration. As part of the kind of budget challenge process, I'm very pleased to say that the adjustments and the proposals that we've put forward for consideration this year will not directly affect either opening hours or any of our work described today with children and young people, including those headline programmes, Kick the Dust, schools programmes, and our dedicated work supporting the fostering programmes across the county. We're very grateful for the support we receive, and we work hard to try and deliver that in accordance with the County Council's priorities, Better Together for Norfolk and our other funders, but focus on children and young people, and the dedicated support we give across those programmes is usually such a high priority that we tend to ring fence that work as sort of, sacrosanct, as it were. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. John, come to yourself.
Thanks, Chairman. I think a couple of the speakers have identified that you run an excellent service. And I know we've had discussions since I've been on the Joint Museums Committee that I feel you hide a lot of your benefits onto the bushel, and I would like to see them promoted more. A lot of the work you do with young people, I'm certain it's only the people here on this committee now that's read this report. Out of the other 83 members, the rest probably have absolutely no idea how much you do. And I've said this a number of times at joint committees meeting where since I've been on that, I think what we do with our museums, and they are totally across the county, is a tremendous achievement. And hence, what I am now going to say, I don't want you to see that as being a criticism. And I notice, I think in paragraph 1.6, you have identified that you are working, or you're in discussions with the fostering team and this sort of thing, because and you may be doing this and just not covered it, but I would like to see the museum system pick up more of a corporate parenting input, where maybe I know you do the fostering days, and I think if you're encouraging people from care experienced background to come to fostering days, they're familiar with the museum, and I would like that to progress into work experience and moving forward along that line, and maybe encouraging volunteering, and like the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, where youngsters have to volunteer, whether we could. And I say you may do, but you don't tell anyone. But promote yourselves as being an organisation that would welcome DOE people to do the requisite volunteering, and as certainly take up more of a position, positive position as a part of the corporate parenting team, and then also, I mean, Councillor Adams just mentioned budgets and finance and this sort of thing, and I just wonder whether we should be looking at trying to attract more volunteers, because we have, I think, a good museum service that I think people would like to be involved in and volunteer their time, a bit similar to what the National Trust do, and the National Trust certainly, I think, survive on a lot of should I say retired people who has time on their hands, and I wonder whether we could pick up some of that, and when we walk into our museums, a notice, would you like to volunteer here, this sort of thing. Certainly with the numbers we're now attracting through the doors of the castle, and there are people about that I'm certain would benefit from being part of the museum service, and I think as a service we would potentially benefit from possibly having a few more volunteers. I'm amazed that the section you have in the report on volunteering is excellent, and I'm certain a lot of people didn't realise we did all of that. But there's always scope. There's always scope for more, and I say I'm just not being critical at all, but I would like you to say yes. Perhaps we should be more positive. Perhaps we should be attracting these 60-year-olds that have got time on their hands to pop in and be an observer in one of our museum rooms 1 day a week, 2 days a week, this sort of thing. And on that, I will leave it. Thank you.
Steve, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Just really great points, really great questions, and really great provocation to us in terms of how we work. So if I can make a couple of responses and possibly hand over to Joe and Jan, who might like to add to that. So the first I'd say is I think we take our role as part of the NCC corporate family and corporate parenting really, really seriously. We were really thrilled to be involved with the really great conversation later in 2025, led by our Executive Director, Sarah Tuff, about what are we going to do about fostering. And I think we have got a long track record, but we could do more. And Jan will probably want to respond on that particular point. I think the children that we particularly see and work with through the Kick the Dust programme, a lot of those are our looked after children directly, and a lot of those are young people who, dare I say, possibly need a little bit of extra support for whatever reason, and come to us for referrals from people like the YMCA Norfolk, who've been a great partner for us over years, so we can find the young people we can most actively work with and support, and we'll get the most benefit from that. We're hugely behind Flourish. We think it's an incredible programme, an incredible commitment from the County Council for young people in Norfolk, and we want to do as much as we can. So I'll let Joe and John perhaps add a bit to that. In terms of volunteering, it's a really great question. We have, I think, well over 400 active volunteers at the moment. I think your question is, could that be 500, 600? And I think the answer is, it probably could. Significantly more volunteers, more than twice as many volunteers as actually paid staff, actually, which is possibly a surprise to people when they hear that, and we're absolutely indebted to those volunteers. Some of those are helping with children and young people programmes, Kick the Dust and some of our schools programme, and they've provided absolutely invaluable support. And some of those volunteers you will have seen quite a lot of recently, like our tapestry volunteers who created the 20-metre long Friends of the Norwich Museum's tapestry, which is now hanging in the halls of the Great Hall in Norwich Castle. Thousands, tens of thousands of hours of support over 7 years to deliver that incredible. So our volunteers help at Gressenhall. One of the most amazing volunteers I met was actually 100 years old and still volunteering and doing some amazing work at Gressenhall, and said that one of the reasons she sort of put down to her sort of energy levels was the ability to work with children and young people through a museum setting and have that community connection. So we get lots out of volunteers, but we know that volunteers get a tremendous amount out of their engagement with the museum service, whether they're young people. The 2 case studies in the report that you have before you showing what young people can get from volunteering in terms of boosting skills, and you've mentioned formal programs like Duke of Edinburgh and some of our training kind of programs, our Kick the Dust program, but also our Teaching Museum sort of program. They all come together at that early years sort of young people age, and then obviously older people, as you say, post-retirement, wanting something where they can give their skills and the experience and wisdom that they've gained over a working career and a lifetime, and give them back to their local community through a museum lens. So we'd love to do more, and again, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it as a committee. And if you know people that might enjoy volunteering at Norfolk Museum Service in whatever capacity, please do point them in our direction. We'll be thrilled to talk to them. And Michelle, our volunteer coordinator, will have an initial chat, and then we'll try and find them the best fit for the skills and interests that they have. I'll pass over to Joe and Jan, who will probably want to add to both of those points.
Yeah, if I could just mention something about to add to a very good comment about fostering, Councillor Fish, and then I'll say something else about volunteering, if I may. As far as fostering, just to update on the report you've got here, I've been in contact with our wonderful colleagues in fostering just earlier this week as far as getting a family fun day at the castle up and running, but also I think critically of talking to their to promoting it, using our spaces as a way of promoting it, both with members of the fostering services, but also maybe having standing displays which our staff can be trained up basically to help promote as part of our role. As far as just building on what Steve said, a lot of our groups in Kick the Dust already do have children who are looked after, involved in that. Some of those are just by the very nature of the areas in which we're working, and some of those are people who we've directly contacted, but that is definitely something that we need to build on. As far as volunteering, is just from my own personal experience in Norwich, within the Norwich Learning Team, we've really got 3 different groups of people who are volunteering and all make a massive contribution. And I think, as Steve said, not only make a contribution to the museum, but we can also make a contribution to their lives as well. We've got young people who are developing skills and experience which they can then take on, because obviously one of the things that young people lack, they may have qualifications, but they don't have experience, and you won't get work if you don't have the experience. We can do that. We've also got people who are exploring changes of career. And in fact, one of our current learning officers came through, started as a volunteer when she was thinking about changing her career. And then finally, we've got people who, as Steve said, older people, retired, and want to give something back and make a massive contribution to what we do.
John, you want to come back?
So, I just realised I missed something out. The other thing I was going to suggest was that whether we could consider allowing free entry to our care experienced children. I mean, this is something we do for council tax. I think that's across the country now. They get reduced council tax, and I think that might be something we could consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Currently, all foster families have free entrance to the museums. But you do raise an important point, which is one of the things about the ongoing conversation with fostering services, that we need to make people aware of that. And one of the reasons that I know they want to promote the Family Fun Day is so that makes families aware that it's an offer, not just in Norwich, not just at Gresson Hall, but it's around the county.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, Leslie, I missed you before. Hello.
No, I didn't put my hand up before. But John has made me think about volunteering, and I wondered if there's any opportunity to link up with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, because it's something that schools or young people are expected to volunteer, and possibly more on a regular basis than just doing work experience. And again, I'm a governor at a high school in Kings Lynn, and I will be asking Lynn Museum if they can take any of the sixth forms students who they want to do some work experience, and they can be left very much to their own devices, given some instructions and deal with it, and don't have to be supervised all the time because they're older. So I will be in touch.
Yes, very good suggestion. I think we need to explore. I mean, we work with young people and arrange. One of the things that Kick the Dust currently does is an online work experience, and at the moment we're exploring basically how we deal with work experience generally. At the moment, the way that high schools are working with work experience is changing. It used to be very much year 10, and now it's coming throughout the entire. And so we've got to see how that links into what we can offer. So it's a very good time.
If I could just come back on that. Yes, schools are going to be, from year 7 onwards, looking at doing work-related learning skills. It's something that I did in my last job when I organised events in primary schools and secondary schools, and there was quite a big difference. And I actually did CVs with some Norwich schools for year 6s, and it'd be amazed. It's amazing how it gave them food for thought as to what their own qualities were. It's not about just skills, it's about what they're like as young people. So I think there will be a lot more of that.
Thank you, Leslie. We've looked at this, and I think for myself. Oh, sorry, Margaret, you want to come back, please? Yeah.
I just wanted to say, my whole career was in early years, and a lot of the time I worked alongside fostering officers, and I'm so proud and pleased with all the work that's going on here. I can't believe it. I'm so proud of that.
Yes, thank you. That's absolutely right. I think, remembering back as a young person, the school trips to museums and to see wildlife and places like Thursford, made history come alive. You're learning stuff in the classroom, but actually in a museum live, you see really how things were. And I think it's so important that that link is there, and it's really good and really positive to see what's happening within the county of Norfolk. So well done to everyone in the service involved. Long may that effort continue. The committee's asked to note and comment on the broader work of Norfolk Museum Service, which I think we've done, children and young people, which I think we've done, and to suggest ways in which the museum service could work even more closely. And I think we've had some suggestions, including tokens and things from Mike and etc. Are there any specific, first off, those two recommendations in the paper, are we all in agreement with those? We've done that. And are there any recommendations we wish to make to Cabinet? I don't think specifically there are, but definitely some of the ideas to take note of that came forward. So thank you all very much indeed for that. And we shall move on. Thank you. The next item we are to look at, and something which we've mentioned actually in the last report, is that promoting the uptake of fostering and adoption in Norfolk. We're on page 43 of the agenda. The responsible Cabinet member would be Penny Carpenter. Unfortunately, she had to send her apologies today. So I'd ask Phil Watson as Director, Michelle Brady and Amy Syburn to introduce the report, please. I don't know who's leading off.
I'll start off, Chair.
You're starting, Phil, eh? Right, okay.
Almost feels like a segue from the previous items. That's lovely, and it was very encouraging to hear from colleagues in the museum service that because this is a huge boon to our foster carers to it can often be quite a challenging, isolating role that they perform. But having them engaged in culture and the community for themselves and the children they're caring for is just such a positive, and it demonstrates in a way how much this is a joint endeavour around recruitment and retention of foster carers. So I just thought I'd start by saying that, and also apologies from Michelle, who can't join us today, but I'll be handing over to Amy, my head of fostering, adoption and kinship services shortly, and we're going to try and make the technology work and get some fabulous slides up on screen. Look at that. That's marvellous, isn't it, when it works? So yes, I mean, basically the report that's been prepared for the committee is really trying to provide an overview of the current landscape of fostering and adoption in Norfolk. But what it also aims to do, and I must emphasise, it contextualises this within the national and regional picture, in the sense of hopefully reassuring for committee members that this is not just a Norfolk issue, in a sense, a say issue, but it's also opportunity. And in many ways, we've got lots of reasons to celebrate in Norfolk, and have some very positive results that not all areas are experiencing. But I think everyone is feeling this is a priority area. It was a key plank of the National Children's Social Care Reform and Josh McAllister's recommendations, which successive governments have embraced, and certainly around fostering, there is such a huge kind of push and resource being put behind it. But what I would say in Norfolk, and I say in many meetings like that, is we are hugely ambitious, and that's how we've got those positive results for children, and particularly for the children in care experience family-based care, and that has driven our programme of transformation. So it does, these slides will outline those achievements, ongoing challenges, and our strategic priorities around recruitment of foster carers and adopters, and I must stress that as well. So I think the only other thing I would say is it's a bit of a rallying call, I suppose, for elected members to get behind what is that joint corporate commitment to what can we do to support recruitment and retention of foster carers, but also adopters. So thank you very much for tabling this today, and I'm going to hand over to Amy.
Thank you, Phil. I think we're somehow on slide 3 here, and I'm not sure if we can move to slide 1. But thank you, Phil, for that introduction, and also it's been really delightful hearing about all of the stuff going on already across our community to promote fostering and adoption. But I don't know if we can move to the second slide. I was just going to talk a bit about the national landscape, because the difficulty.
Just a second, Amy. Who's driving the slides?
I'm not actually sure. I didn't.
Because yeah.
I'm going to try and share mine. So just give me 1 second.
Because we need to be on the right one, don't we? Do our YouTube viewers won't know what we're talking about?
No, that's right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Magic.
We're there now. We know who's driving, right?
So this slide takes us through the national overview of fostering and adoption and the numbers of children that we have in care in England. And it demonstrates quite efficiently that sadly more and more children are coming into our care in our country. Fewer people are wanting to become foster carers or adoptive parents, and by way of an example, the UK as a whole has seen a reduction of 15% in the number of foster carers over the last 4 years. Residential care is becoming more and more expensive, yet with fewer foster families available, residential homes are the only safe alternative options that councils have available to them a lot of the time. The number of children living in residential care in the UK has doubled since 2011, quite a striking statistic. And it's a really sad fact that many of these children who live in our residential care could live with foster families if they were available. Importantly, residential care isn't bad per se. Lots of children thrive in those settings, and we're lucky to have some really fabulous ones, but we do know that most children thrive in fostering families. And then if we move to the next slide, which you've all had a good gander at, that brings us to our local picture. So numerous research papers show us that compared to children in residential care settings, children who experience multiple breakdowns in their care, children in residential care settings or children who experience multiple breakdowns in their care compared to children who are adopted, grew up in stable foster homes or with kinship carers, are much more likely to do better at school, are less likely to be excluded, are more likely to complete secondary education, are more likely to achieve secure and stable employment. They're more likely to maintain positive relationships and have higher rates of secure attachment. They experience lower levels of emotional and behavioural difficulties and have lower levels of criminal involvement. So we know the evidence base is there. If we move on to the next slide, thank you, Phil, my PA.
Trustee assistant.
Yeah, trustee assistant. This slide looks at our local adoption and fostering numbers over the last 3 years and then into this financial year. Last year, the rest of the country saw a 12% decrease in the number of people wanting to adopt. And whilst we're very proud to say that we bucked that trend, we had an influx of 43 new adoptive families last year. We're now experiencing the same downturn in recruitment as the rest of the country. So, as you can see there, we're predicted with a forecast of 26 new adoptive households. And then looking at our fostering approvals, we are very proud of an upward trend over the last 3 years, and notably that's bucked the trend of some of our regional fostering services, but we are still not recruiting anywhere near the numbers that children need us to recruit. So going into a bit more detail about the challenges that we're facing in adoption, although we had that strong year for adoption last year, the national picture is now catching up with us. Inquiries continue to fall everywhere, including here in Norfolk. What we're seeing is that wider social trends play a significant role. Improved IVF success rates, fewer people choosing to have children, and changes in family structures are all reducing the number of people considering becoming adopters. This year we've approved just 20 adoptive households so far, and as I said, that's compared to 43 last year. And on the previous slide, there was a link maker figure that set out that there are currently about 140, I think it's 149 available adopters across England, with over 1,200 children waiting to be matched with them. So when we deep a little deeper into the challenges for fostering, similarly, the biggest challenge is around sufficiency, and ambitiously we have set ourselves a target of 50 new fostering households this year. We have 37 children currently living in residential homes that we believe could and should have their needs best met within a fostering family. And for those 37 children alone, the financial pressure is almost £9 million a year. But more importantly, the human costs for them are far greater. And we believe that these children deserve a family life. Foster carers' voices help us to really consider what they need to change, and there are some really useful national surveys that lots of foster carers engage with. And most recently, a State of the Nations survey found that 60% of foster carers had considered resigning. And what they tell us tends to be consistent. Finances is cited as a substantial barrier to becoming a fostering family, with the cost of living crisis having a significant impact. But they also tell us that they experience a lack of support, burnout, and feel undervalued at times. Comparing the costs of residential care and fostering speaks volumes. As you can see on that slide, a residential home costs on average around £300,000 a year for a child, whereas a Norfolk County Council fostering family costs around £44,000 a year. So not only is fostering cost effective for the council, but it affords most children far better outcomes. It's not all doom and gloom. So we have done lots of work to reform the adoption process in Norfolk, and that's really paying off. We are seeing faster responses, better communication, and more tailored support, and our adopters are telling us that they have benefited from that. Our use of adopters' lived experiences and information events has been really powerful, and the real stories that they tell others helps to really counter some myths that are out there around adoption. Importantly, alongside adoption recruitment, we're seeing more children successfully staying with their birth families and wider family networks, and that's thanks to the early preventative help that we have across children's services. And another really good thing is that our children looked after numbers are at a 5-year low, which is a huge achievement. Looking at some of the successes within fostering, we've transformed our inquiry and recruitment process with clearer information, better digital presence, and more visible recruiter, kind of business person who's out in the community working with people, raising the profile of fostering across our county. Norfolk County Council is also now a fostering friendly employer, which sends a really strong message of support and inclusion. And we're also working alongside other businesses and organisations to do the same. We've reached out to churches, charities, public services, building partnerships that didn't exist before, and everyone that we're speaking to is just vibrant about this topic, again, as we've seen today. We also lead Foster East, which is our Department for Education funded regional hub, which means we are shaping recruitment strategies and sharing best practice across the 11 local authorities over the east of England. And we're also really proud that we've expanded our Mockingbird model. If anybody wants to learn about that, let me know and I can fill you in more detail. But it's essentially a community-based approach that we're already seeing as preventing foster family breakdowns and keeping our very valued foster carers within our service. So, this final slide really is at the heart of why we're here today and what we are asking of you. So it's around what you can do to help. Every member here is a community leader. Your networks are wide, they're trusted, and we're asking you to help us to open doors, especially with employers and community organisations. We can provide everything that you need, complete toolkits with post videos, images, posters, leaflets, and some of the things or some of the questions that we would like to ask of you today are, could you champion fostering and adoption on your social media? Could you share messages in town and parish networks? Could you help us to bring the public and private sectors together? And that would be especially encouraging businesses to become fostering friendly employers. If you can make the introductions, we will do the rest. We'll do visits, presentations, the provision of tailored materials. And I suppose I want to close really by just saying that you can't underestimate the influence that you all have. Many of our best carers tell us that they applied to become foster carers because a trusted person mentioned fostering to them once. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you very much indeed. Committee members, comments, questions? Oh, I've got one or two now. I'm going to go this way this time. I've got John first, then Leslie, and then I think I saw Mike and Tim. Oh, and yeah, everybody. John first.
Thank you. I find it hard to understand how it can cost £297,000 a year for one child. If that is really the case, why can't we be building homes ourselves? It would be an awful lot cheaper in the long run. And in the short term, it would be cheaper to pay our foster carers a lot more money to encourage a lot more foster carers, surely. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come in first, and then if Amy wants to add to that, yeah, I mean, absolutely. We share the sort of motivation for that point and that question. And again, it's been asked nationally, I think, that the market isn't working well for children's care placements, and there is profiteering going on, and hence you see spiralling costs for residential care. So absolutely, I think we all recognise that, but also our strategy has deliberately, as Children's Services, been around expanding our residential provision, because as Amy pointed out earlier, I think sometimes residential care is the right answer for young people. Tends to be older children who that might suit better. We want to provide more of that, so we've got an expansion programme, and that's been approved in terms of investment. And so, yes, absolutely, we want to take on the market to reduce that excessive profiteering, and us being able to guarantee value, not just a lower cost, but outcomes for children are maximised. But I would go back to the point we probably both stressed, that if possible, we want to offer family-based care to all children. And so I think the answer is really to increase the number of foster carers. That will prevent us needing to go externally and rely on the market. So that, unless you want to add anything, Amy.
John, do you want to come back now? That's fine. I think I've got Leslie next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As I was driving here today, I heard on the Today programme about how some residential facilities are really poor, and they're not rated highly by Ofsted, or not even visited by Ofsted. I'm sure that doesn't apply to Norfolk County Council. And I was too busy watching the traffic at Thickthorne, so I didn't take huge interest in it.
Very wise.
But I wondered if we could, as an organisation, Norfolk County Council, tell the press how good we are following that report. I mean, I didn't hear the title of the report even. It was just suddenly some fostering was mentioned, and I picked up on it because I think we've got something to tell. And I would hope that we do have residential homes that are 100% good.
Shout about, you know, the really positive progress and our ambitions for children, all genuine in the sense of, you know, our use of unregulated placements is non-existent. We have a large internal estate. It's all very positively rated by Ofsted, so good across the board. It's had a long track history of providing good quality care, stickability for children, keeping children local to their families and their community. So, I mean, we absolutely stand by that with conviction. And, you know, going back to the sort of adoption and fostering ask, that is, you know, one of the key solutions to needing at all to rely on residential care, let alone needing then to go outside of Norfolk. But I think everyone in this room shares that ambition. So that's probably it.
Thank you. Not clear to add to the list. Mike, I think I've got you next, please.
Yeah, thanks again. Again, appreciate that. Just such a detailed report, and yeah, I'd certainly like one of the packs, the toolkits, to go and take out to the community. I think that is superb. It's just with regards to picking up the points that John's raised, and that goes back to the external residential home and the cost per annum per child. What's included within that cost? Because there seems similarity between, again, the annual cost for an individual fostering agency or a fostering home. And I'm just thinking of my 5 children. If I was to get that per annum, my God. Let's just say I don't think I'd be sitting here right now. So that is the first part. And then in relation to that cost, what is the average length of stay? Because in my mind, not all are going to be a year. So what's the average length of stay? And what is the longest stay? Because I can imagine some of those are quite eye-watering. And then the other element of that is, within that annual stay, what number almost yo-yo between the stay and a foster home and back, and what are we doing about that? So sorry, there's a scattergun approach there, but that's how my mind works.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So, yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of detail in there around numbers that you're asking for, and probably we'd need to come back to you with a bit more detail around all those various aspects, and we're quite happy to do so because those are the statistics and that's the data that drives us to want to do things differently. I would say actually that cost that we showed up there was an average cost of residential care. So you will see far in excess of that particular number for some residential placements, and so you know that is an average unit cost. So we're quite happy in some other forum or to come back and speak in more detail. I think my colleague James would like to step in at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, if we're happy to try and give a bit more of a sort of briefing note to cover some of that. But I guess in terms of the sort of literal answer to the question of how do you end up spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on a single placement, the majority of it reflects a staffing cost, and often there'll be a staffing ratio. So if you imagine for a child, if you need 2 adults for that one child at any one time, thinking that through, given you're covering also the nighttime period as well as the daytime period, and people working in shifts, you actually end up employing a team of 5 or 6 people to deliver that 24/7. And actually, when you add that up as a staffing cost, it ends up being the size of a small team of people just for one child. And that's how you get to a cost of hundreds of thousands of pounds. Adding on top of that all of the oversight, building costs, in the private market a degree of profit being made. In some cases, you might have a therapeutic input as well as your basic residential staff, and there may be various other professionals with a more specialist background providing that into, and that's how you end up with a package of care that runs to hundreds of thousands of pounds. In some cases, we would say that is the right solution for children with the most complex needs, but I think the point being made here is that in some instances, we think a foster carer could provide the right level of care if they are sufficiently skilled, but in the absence of them, you end up in a residential setting, and even at the cheaper end, a team of people staffing around 1 or 2 children is an extremely expensive thing to do.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Phil, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I did want to come back in because I realised there was a point I didn't answer, which is also a very good one, Mike, and you know, it's something we very much considered, which is if you spend a huge amount of money on residential care, why don't you just pay foster carers a lot more money? So yes, we've been through you know, that exercise of thinking about, you know, what the pay and recognition is for foster carers. I think what research tells us and what good practice models nationally tell us is that it isn't all about pay. It is part of the answer, definitely, and Amy's touched on that and may want to elaborate, but you know, we know that will make a difference if they're rewarded fairly for the incredibly important role that they do. But it's, you know, it's often the whole package, which is the therapeutic support, the practical support that makes this doable. So I think, you know, best will in the world, if you put even a 6-figure number behind it, people would just not be able to manage some of these situations because the impact on them, their family lives, and so there is a kind of a limit to that, you know, how much money makes the difference. So that's where we've drawn the line, but also, you know, recognise people do need better reward.
Yes, and just to add to that, I mean, Phil, you did a grand job, but there's a really well-known theory, Herzberg, chap called Herzberg, who talks about intrinsic motivators being the key factor, and then you have other motivators. So finances for foster care is kind of on the outside. The intrinsic motivator is the key, and if you get the external motivators too low or too high, it can overrule the intrinsic motivators. So we've done a lot of work thinking about what differences that we need to make. Based on that, and I think the cost of living is probably one of the most substantial factors that has played a role that we now need to respond to.
Okay, I've got. You want to come back? Sorry, Mike. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
It very quick. No, thank you for that. I think that deeper dive, that information would be really helpful, and maybe just in relation to what James said, it might be my naivety because I do appreciate what you say about 24-hour care, complex needs. But that very much fits within a family setting, and so many families have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. That happens, so there seems quite a disparity. So again, going back to having more information regards, that would be helpful because I still can't comprehend that. Thank you.
I think if the details behind that could be circulated out to all committee members, that would be helpful, please. Thank you, Mike. I've got Councillor Adams next. Tim, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. And obviously, I would also be wanting to do my bit in terms of promoting your recruitment activity. I've probably got a couple of questions, but if I can start with, I saw in the report that the number of children with plans for adoption compared to our neighbours in the Adopt East Alliance, it was higher in Norfolk. So does that point to the possibility we could be doing more at the start to support birth families staying together?
Yeah, I mean, again, really sort of poignant. question there, in the sense of, yes, that's kind of driving our whole transformation programme, which is how we intervene earlier, how we engage not just immediate family, but whole family networks right from the start, and you know, engage with them in the sense of them driving the plans and the solutions to the challenges they face, because very early on then you can identify that, is there somebody in that network, that natural network, who can step up and provide that care. So I mean, absolutely. So our, you know, I suppose our internal programme of transformation as Norfolk County Council is now very much aligned with and possibly ahead of the National Families First programme, which is emphasising and doubling down on some of these elements, and, you know, will provide a level of funding, additional funding towards us getting this right. Is that, you know, it's engaging family networks earlier, it's reforming our kinship care offer, and so families can still remain with you know, those who they know and they're familiar with. So in all those aspects, you know, I think, yes, ultimately we're questioning ourselves around those adoption, you know, children placed for adoption rates, and we often review, myself included, our adoption decisions to make sure they're the right ones. But actually, you're quite right. It's all about, you know, if we get in earlier, if we provide those educare services to the intensity that we need to do, and work in the right ways with families and family networks, then really that's the solution to that particular challenge.
Thank you. Tim, do you want to come back at all?
It was a different question. Do you want
Oh, yeah,
to wait
please.
for...
No.
Is that okay? So
Yeah,
this was back to fostering, which I think has dominated a lot of the questions. So in 2022, the County Council announced its, I think it was referred to as a sort of new deal for foster carers, with 3 tiers of payments, and this led to quite a lot of criticism at the time, including some who felt high-functioning children with complex trauma might be graded lower, and could be resulting in a drop in income for some families. So does that, and given the conversation we've had today, indicate we do need to review that structure of payments again? And can I ask what sort of feedback we get from foster families about that on an ongoing basis?
Thank you for that question. I became head of service about a year or so after the 2022 transformation. And one of the things that I was really keen to do when I was new in post was learn from foster carers what's good, what's bad, what can we do to improve things. And since that time, we've held lots of engagement sessions with our foster carers, which has then positively led to us developing a very specific reshaping our fostering service proposal. And that's actually going to be presented at Cabinet on the 26th of January. So, I mean, I could probably spend 3 hours talking you through all of those proposals, but they are very, very much based on what foster carers tell us worked from those previous changes, because it wasn't all bad, and what else they needed us to do differently for them. So I'm really, really excited to share that with you soon.
Excellent, thank you. Oh,
yeah, and I mean, fundamentally, there isn't a difference in the sense of, you know, our fostering fees being based on the idea that, you know, we are linking that to the children's needs and outcomes, that it's strengths-based, and that we're incentivising carers, if you like, to take some of our you know, more challenging children and young people into their homes, and rewarding that accordingly. So, in a way, it shares very much the same features. But I think, as Amy said, I think the extent to which we've engage with foster carers on this occasion is yeah, they're very much you know, aware of and been brought into and contributed to the new deal.
So just to confirm then, the schedule of payments is being reviewed as well as part of this work?
Yes, it is. We're looking at some increases to fostering fees, and foster carers get two different types of pay, which I think isn't quite commonly known. They have an allowance, which is to pay for the costs of the child. So that includes things like your heating bills, their food, their clothing, and then they receive a fee. And that fee is where our Value and Care tool helps us to consider the complexity of a child's needs and what the appropriate remuneration is for that. So we've also reviewed that too. But fundamentally, we are really confident that having a process by which a child's needs is assessed and understood and then equates to appropriate remuneration is the right approach.
Thank you. I've got Maxine next. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few points, and I'm going to try and get my thoughts on some of them. First of all, in terms of Leslie's question earlier on, I had the report and had a little look at it first thing. So I think, Phil, you were clear that we don't have any unregulated foster homes, residential homes that we're using. So if you could just sort of give that definitive answer. I think you said that, but that would be good to know. I wanted to ask about linked families because it's not mentioned in the report, and I think linked families comes under, but I could be wrong, under the fostering service, and if it doesn't, then just put me right. And if so, I'd like some information on that. Shall I do one question at a time so that I don't? It's a lot, otherwise, isn't it? To yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Yes, so I mean, we often answer questions around unregulated placements from various different sources, and so you know, I would say it's somewhat of a dynamic picture, but because there are occasions when we have used unregulated placements, but we will. When we do, we notify Ofsted. We will only do that if the provider is committed to registering with Ofsted. We put in contingency and additional support around that. I think at the last request for that information, we talked about actually some children we'd placed, a sibling group of 3 within our own estate. It wasn't yet a registered home, but we had our own residential teams and services in there supporting those 3 children. My understanding is they have moved on now, but that, you know, it's in some ways par for the course in terms of the sufficiency picture and the challenges we face. We make no apologies for the fact that at times, because of the sufficiency challenges, we need to look at creative solutions, but they will always be child focused. We will put the tightest support around them, and you know, we'll ensure that you know, as I say, that any provider, including ourselves, registers registers with Ofsted, which in Ofsted's mind, as long as you've started that process, they're happy with that, and you've informed them. So we've always done that, and we'll continue to do that.
Amy?
And then just on linked families, can you clarify what you mean by that? So my understanding, and the answer will be yes if my understanding's right, is that linked families is a very bespoke type of foster care that's afforded to children, most usually with disabilities or additional needs, to help them stay within their birth families. So they will come for daycare or sleepovers with foster carers.
Yeah, exactly that. Yes, that's what I mean by linked families. I thought that was what it was called. That's what I've always had it referred to as in within the system. So yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes it's referred to as short breaks, and I often hear people using those two terms interchangeably. So yes, it is within our fostering service, and actually late last year we reformed the support and the package that we have, and the financial package that we have for our linked families foster carers, because we really want to grow that cohort, and we would be really grateful again for everybody's support around helping people to know about the different types of foster care, because I think lots of people typically imagine a foster carer to be perhaps a couple living in a home with children that are living with them until they're 18 and beyond, and actually there are so many more different types of fostering out there that all have a huge difference, make a positive difference for children.
Can I come back? Yeah, please. Thank you. I'm just surprised that it's not mentioned as part of the service. That you know, that's quite a specific, valuable service that is, as you say, supporting families to keep, although they're not necessarily children who have experienced care, they are families at potentially at risk of sort of a family breakdown. So it would have been. I would have expected to have just seen mention of it in the report. The next thing I wanted to say about was one other point to make is that we do have an item in September, because I'd asked for this, about profiteering in residential homes. So hopefully we can explore that a bit more at that meeting. But yeah, sorry, just going back to what I was going to ask. So the voices of children and families. I had asked about this report that it specifically included the voices of children and families when this came, because it's really great. There's some really brilliant information in here and so on. I know you're obviously doing really great work behind the scenes, but what I don't experience in here, and you've even referred to a survey and some information you're going to be presenting to Cabinet, but there's nothing in here that gives us any sense of the experience of families and how they perceive the service and the support that they receive from the service, either in fostering or adoption. There's a few sort of cherry-picked comments, for here and there about specific things, but there's no sense in here of what it's like to be a foster carer or an adoptive family and how they experience the system and the support they receive. So how can we, I'm just wondering how we as a committee can really understand that the work that's happening and the impact of that on families if we don't have any sense of what families think about that. And so for me, that's completely missing from here. And, I'm not trying to negate everything else that's in here, but that is not part of it for me. And I'm really disappointed in that, because it did specifically ask that it would be.
We've sort of given the task of trying to sell this to folk. We've got to try and recruit more foster carers. And actually the positive experience that people have is, I think, the crux of what you're getting to, Maxine. Because, if there's good outcomes for people, the children involved, say how brilliant it is because they've now got a family and they love their new family, that kind of thing. That's the type of thing that really helps to sell, the idea. Yes, you could put a poster up in, every village hall and community hall in Norfolk, but actually a positive message of, from little Johnny saying, yeah, it's brilliant, now I'm with my new family because they really look after him. And we went to the museum last week. That kind of positive message actually shows people what good can come from this. And I was always told you sell the benefits and not the price. And we've talked about the price. And I think what Councillor Webb is asking is, can we see the benefits? Is that right? Or have I missed?
No, not quite.
Okay, please come back.
I mean, partly, yeah, of course. I'm not talking about it just in terms of selling it to people, which is obviously really important. That if they are experiencing the positive aspects that you've obviously done some surveying on, which is great, then that needs to be potential families need to know about that. But also I'm talking about what are the issues that even, there's nothing from, we also want to increase adoptive families, and there's nothing in here from those families. And I've been asking questions recently about the impact of the change to the Adoption Support and Guardianship Support Fund, and the impact of that on adoptive families, their experience, and if we're look at, and it may be that it's too early because the change only came in April, but I would really like to see that, the impact of that, something at the committee level, so that we can actually understand it. Because if we're asking, we recognise that there's support that foster families need, and you've talked about potentially 2-to-1 scenarios in residential homes, which obviously doesn't really happen once those children are in a family environment. So that's really hard for those families, and there is, as you say, there isn't necessarily an amount of money that can help with that. It's the support that comes with it, I would imagine, from the service. But if those types of complex children are adopted and are living in adopted homes, then and the levels of support and therapy and so on that they have been receiving have now reduced because of the changes to the fund, and the ability to get assessments and for therapy to then be provided, then that puts those adoptive placements potentially at risk and a breakdown, and also just the experience of those families in day-to-day life of how that is affecting their lives and the outcomes for their children, and all of that. And that's the kind of thing that I think we really need to understand, because once families are then in the adoptive system, that that sort of extra level of support that comes within the fostering system isn't necessarily the same, is it? Sorry, that was rather long.
So before anyone attempts to answer that, I think as a committee, Councillor Webb previously did ask that kind of example and lived experience was something that we were interested in seeing and understanding. Can I just ask the committee, is that something we would like to see going forward in a follow-up to this at a future meeting? Yes, I'm seeing nods around the room. So rather than, I think, because the detail's not in the report, so, and I think examples of really ought to be in a follow-up report. So, all agreed? Thank you, Maxine. It was a valid point when you made it, when we looked to get the item on the agenda, but as you say, it's not there. And I think both the positive sides and the positive outcomes, and some of the negative sides and the negative outcomes, we need to understand, what folk are up against. And the more we understand that, the easier it is for us to help and direct in terms of policy. Phil, you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to reiterate, and there's some reflection for us, I suppose, on adopters, but certainly with foster carers, as I stated earlier. I mean, even if it's not in this specific report, we have alluded to that in the cabinet report, and as I say, we've heard their voice in terms of creating the new offer in a range of kind of engagement events. So I mean, the voice is there,
and we need it. So thank you. You've heard that the committee wants it, so yeah, please. Thank you. Now, just so that you know where we're at, I've got Claire, I've got John Ward, I've got John Fisher, and then I'm going to bring this item to a close and then have a 5-minute or so comfort break. So, Claire, you've been waiting patiently. Over to you, please. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. Just a quick one. I note from the presentation that 60% of foster carers are considering resigning, and one of them that really jumped out at me was the lack of respect from other professionals. I just wonder if officers could example and explain that, please. And it may be in the mentioned in the report, and I might have missed it, but if you could explain that, please.
Yeah, so that's particular statistic comes from the Fostering Network State of the Nation survey, which is a survey, I believe, not just for foster carers in England, but also in Scotland and Wales. And the feedback around not feeling supported by professionals is that they're from a foster carer's perspective, they don't feel that they are treated as an equal in that professional capacity. And we've spoken to our own foster carers about this, and they too have had varying experiences at times. And not just from social workers, for example, it's from everybody that they speak to. They find themselves in a very unique position whereby they're entrusted with the care of a child. They're responsible for the care of that child, but they're not the parent for that child. And that can be a really, really difficult dynamic when they're not able to always make the really big decisions, and there are multiple people involved in that. So that's something that foster carers are telling us: involve us in those conversations, in those decisions. And if decisions are made that we might not disagree with, let us know why so we can understand. So I think that there's a bit of a cultural shift really for all of us to be thinking about how that feels for foster carers.
Thank you. Councillor Ward, John.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick one. The number of adoptive households fell from 43 to 20. What were the main reasons those people gave for not wanting to carry on, please?
So that wasn't, just to clarify, it wasn't a reduction, so we didn't lose them, but what we did have was, last year we had 43 new approved adoptive households, and then this year we're on track to for that number to reduce to around 26. And I think from what research tells us, from what our adoptive or prospective adoptive families tell us, it really is about societal changes are some of the biggest factors that contribute to that. Things like IVF, not people not wanting to have as many children as they have had previously.
And Councillor Fisher, John, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of questions, actually. On where it says our approach to regional commissioning on page 59, where you're looking at working with the other authorities in the East, and you say that by working together with the 11 authorities, we can secure a care market which works in a more effective partnership. Is that building new homes within that, or is it purely working together to put pressure on the existing market to bring the prices down?
I'll perhaps do this one. You're referring to the regional care collaborative, which complements the regional work around fostering, and it's sort of together as a programme. And I guess I would say it's sort of all of the above of what you've listed. So we are working as a region to do things like share our data, share best practice, look at where common challenges and common gaps are in the care market, but also in future to secure, organise or buy provision for the region or for sub-regional groups rather than just buy it as a single local authority. Absolutely, as part of that, we want to leverage our buying power to secure a better deal from the market. That's partly about price, but it's also about behaviour. It's really hard to just say we're not going to pay any more than this, because actually the needs of each individual child are quite unique, and if you need the placement, you need the placement. But we are looking to work with that market in such a way that it's really transparent with us about everything that it's doing, why it's doing it, and its cost base, and that their behaviours work in the interests of children. We do sadly see too many providers, for example, giving notice on placements pretty much immediately, and children have to move to another home, the next day. There's an element of cherry picking that goes on, frankly, at times, where homes will look at, rather than the absolute need of the child and what's best for them, which children will be easiest for us to accommodate in that regard. And they don't always work in partnership with authorities on our care plan for that child, in terms of, you know, we might want to support a period of care followed by a step down to fostering or a move on to reunification, but actually not always external providers work with us in that way. So our intention is to do joint projects, and that will be just economically efficient, but also to try to leverage the sort of collective action of the region to strike a new relationship with the external care market to hopefully get them to work with us as partners rather than as sort of have a transactional relationship. So it's all of the above of what you described, really, and within that is obviously the joint fostering work as well, where we think pooling our resources and our thinking can help us all get more foster carers.
Okay, thank you. The other question is really, when I sat on the adoption panel for a few years, and one of the things I used to find odd about that was the amount of time and the detail that it took for people to become adopters. And I think on any report it identifies 25 months. And I think Norfolk, I think that 25 months is identified in the report as being faster than what the national average is. And how many people actually within that 25 months, and I said when I was on the adoption panel, we used to get all the details of what was involved in the training, but how many people actually drop out within that 25 months? And could it, I know we're faster than the national average, but could that be reduced? I just felt that a lot of the detail of becoming an adopter seemed to me to be over the top and unnecessarily risk averse, but you know there may be a good reason.
Thank you for that question, John. I think it's similar to the follow-up with Councillor Webb's point. I think in terms of adoption, we're quite happy to come back in terms of more detail around, you know, looking at attrition rates and reasons, and you know, I think absolutely that's something we'd be happy to actually, you know, even as a separate item, just come and talk to the committee about.
Thank you. Thanks, John. I think we've heard, you know, there are real benefits to children, certainly for the majority that when they are fostered or adopted, over and above being in other forms of care. And, you know, to increase the numbers that we have coming through, you know, to become adopters or fosterers in Norfolk is, you know, it's inherent, I think, on all of us to try and promote that. And I know as a service you try to promote that. I mentioned during our sifting meeting for this item, you know, nationally, it's a story on one of the biggest longest running soap opera in the world. Coronation Street currently have a family who are acting as fosterers for two girls, and you know, one of the main characters in that said, well, we need more Tim and Sallys, we need more people to do that. So even, you know, they have a social conscience, these shows, they try and put you know, current topics and things into the public domain. And I think off the back of that, you know, we need more Tim and Sallys, as was said in the show, and anything that we can do to help to promote that, I think, is important. You know, posters, there needs to be a poster in every single village hall and community hall, on every notice board in Norfolk. You know, if we could achieve that, at least it's in front of people, makes them think about it every time they go into the village hall, whatever. But the social media aspect of it, and actually if we could work something off the back of the fact that there is some national publicity with that current storyline, would be, I think, beneficial. So we've got Councillor Bambridge who's listening to the Today Show, and I'm listening to Coronation Street. But ultimately, what we both want, you know, but what's both wanted and needed is the best outcome for the children, and more fosterers would help that. So anything we can do to promote that, I think, is important. We are asked as a committee to review and support fostering and adoption services approach to foster care and adopter recruitment and foster care retention, and make recommendations to Cabinet as they think appropriate. And I think we need, as part of that, we need more information to come to a subsequent meeting as requested from Councillor Webb. Members of the committee asked to consider their role as community leaders and how we can further reach out and support fostering and bring public and private sectors together around this critical challenge. I think that's a challenge for all of us, not just the committee members, but I think every member of Norfolk County Council. We need to get that information out to members on every opportunity that we can. But thanks, Phil, thanks, Amy, and thanks, questioners. I do propose now that we have a 5-minute comfort break, and we'll be back on the next item as soon as we can after that. Thank you. It's about to be up and broadcasting. Yes, we are indeed. Right, welcome back to today's Children's, Families and Community Select Committee. We now move to page 69 of the agenda, which is item 9, and this is the Children's Services Performance Report. Oh, here's my Vice Chairman, including a deep dive into the performance of elective home education, which I know is something the committee has always taken an interest in. Responsible Cabinet member would ordinarily be Councillor Carpenter. As I said, apologies from her. And I think in terms of the presentation, introduction to the agenda, we've got a number of long waiting department all sat up here. And who's taking the lead on this? John, is this one for you? Over to John, please. Thank you.
Just morning, everyone, and yeah, really good to be with you again. So we've got two parts essentially to the report this morning. The first bit, which I will cover, is an overview of the performance of children's services in relation to all of our corporately significant vital signs, and then the main item really is the performance of elective home education, which Ian and other colleagues behind will lead you through a presentation on to accompany the report that you have in front of you. So if I can cover the kind of first part around overall performance, two questions that we ask of you around that one, which is question 1 in terms of the actions required to review the performance against our strategic objectives. So we align our 4 vital signs are aligned to our strategic objectives as a service through consideration of our performance against those vital signs. And then the second question of yourselves is to consider any ideas where you would like to see a future dive, a future deep dive into performance, because the report that you've got in front of you is very much kind of quite a surface level to identify those areas where you would like further insight into where we might be doing well and those areas where we're seeking to improve. The other thing I would say is that the very nature, and I know many of you know children's services performance very well, the very nature of a number of our indicators is that they are kind of sometimes system-wide indicators where we seek to influence, but they're not necessarily in our direct control. And you've had some example of that already with that discussion into fostering. So if I could take you through the kind of four vital signs, just to give a brief kind of summary and some updates. So the first one is around improving education, inclusion and achievement. So we have some good news in that area and still some significant challenge. So the Norfolk Learning Collaborative, now very well established in Norfolk and is really bringing together the education system, and we're starting to now see the impact of the work of that group. So this is school leaders identifying with us the areas where they wish to see performance and outcomes, and also their own kind of resource improve. As a result of that work, we have seen some improvement in Key Stage 2 attainment. So still a long way to go to get to where we would like that to be. But it has risen from 52% of children achieving expected standards in reading, writing and maths last year to 55%, just over 55% this year. That is still well below that national average, which sits at around 62%, but it is quite a significant improvement, and you can link that particularly to improvement in writing results, which was quite a significant piece of work through the Learning Collaborative. So that's a good piece of news there. And also in terms of education outcomes, we saw quite an improvement in GCSE attainment as well at secondary schools. So overall attainment 8 scores, which is kind of average attainment across 8 subjects, improved to 45.5 to 44.2, and we actually now have more children, more young people in Norfolk achieving a pass in English and maths than the national average. So that's a good piece of news. It's been the case in mathematics for a while, and now it's the case for English and mathematics combined as well, which is obviously really good news as those young people transition into post-16. In terms of where our concerns lie in that area, early years is one area. So for a number of years, attainment of a good level of development in early years has been in line with national averages. This year and last year, we have seen a decline in the attainment of the disadvantaged cohort within that group, so those that are eligible for free school meals, which we do link to a corresponding decline in uptake of early education places. So we've seen that as the focus on early years and childcare has been very much on enabling families to work, and additional funding available to enable more children in families that are working to access free childcare in early years. We've seen a corresponding drop-off in the take-up of children from disadvantaged families. So we're seeking to address that quite urgently. Central government recognises that the early years is a priority and an issue as well through their Best Start in Life initiative. So we are refreshing our early years strategy in response to that, and there's quite a bit of work ongoing that's already starting to come to fruition. So the communication to those families and the letters that will go out and how we contact those families is changed now. So there'll be some new communication around that that's going out today, actually. The other area where we have some concerns remaining is around inclusivity, and particularly around absence and exclusion rates. Absence rates overall have been improving and are broadly in line with national averages, but we do see that there is a cohort of persistently and severely absent children, and a lot of that cohort are from our most vulnerable children in Norfolk. So that's something that we're seeking to address quite urgently, and we've been alert to for quite a while. So that's a big focus within our social care teams and our SEND teams, focusing on attendance and making really good use of the individual pupil attendance data that we now get on a weekly basis. Exclusion rates, as you will know, exclusion rates in Norfolk have been a concern for quite a while. Some good news, we think, on that front, although early days. So our kind of in-year view of exclusions in terms of referrals is currently showing that it's quite a bit down on what it was at this point last year. How that then kind of carries forward and what that looks like as an exclusion rate, it's too early to say, but there is some sign that the work that we saw impacting last year in Kings Lynn in particular, around trying to work differently as a school with the school system around how young people can be managed within additional provision attached to their schools, is showing impact, and we are still seeing the positive results of that. The other area which I think has been focused previously in this committee in terms of areas of concern is around post-16 participation, and trying to get more of our young people participating in education up till 18. And again, biggest part in that is about improved attainment at 16, so it's good to see GCSE results improving, because that will impact positively on that as well. So that's the first area. Second one is reinforcing effective practice. So that was an area that dipped quite significantly in Q2 from Q1. I'm pleased to say that we now know that Q3 performance will be back up at 83% as it was in Q1. So there were two areas that were causing that shift from green to amber. was around timeliness of education healthcare reviews. Was actually a good news story, and Sam McCallum's team is responsible for this. So although there were a number of reviews that were out of timescale, that was, you can't do anything once a review is out of timescale other than review it. And an awful lot of those reviews took place in that quarter, which resulted in that dip in performance in terms of timeliness, but in terms of volume of reviews that took place, it was significantly higher than previous quarters. Now that that backlog, that significant built-up backlog had been addressed, performance is back above target and has been for the last few months. So that will show improvement on that. The other area within there was around a deliberate strategy with a very small number of children where there was a decision made that they should remain on a child protection plan for an extended period of time, because that was the best and safest way of preventing them from being from coming into care and to enable them to be safe within their families. So that's actually quite a successful piece of work. Largely, we don't want to see children on child protection plans for an extended period of time, but in those specific cases, we're very confident that that was the right thing to do. I think I've said everything on that one. Embedding prevention and earlier intervention. So performance in this area remains green. We continue to see the number of children subject to statutory intervention, including coming to care, which you saw earlier, to be reducing over time, over an extended period of time now, and the number of children that require repeat intervention remaining both below national averages. So within that area of social care, all those indicators around our cohort sizes and repeat intervention suggest that our performance remains better than our benchmarks. And in terms of the youth justice system, you remember this was an area that was of concern for a while last year. So we're pleased to say that actually we have seen that does continue to reduce, and that is back on track. Areas of concern within there in the prevention early intervention space, as I've already mentioned, early education take-up is our biggest area of concern within that piece of work now, and making sure that particularly within our most disadvantaged communities, that we do see more of those children attending one of our really high quality early years providers in Norfolk. We've got a really strong system of early years providers in Norfolk, and we need to make sure that all our young people, and particularly those in disadvantaged communities, benefit from that for as long as possible. So there's a lot of targeted work going on in that area as part of the Best Start in Life programme. The last area before I pass on is around managing the market and creating capacity. In terms of our strengths, the time taken to place a child with an adoptive family, you heard some good news around that already, and that continues to improve this quarter. And Norfolk has maintained its strong record in providing mainstream school places. As you're probably aware, declining birth rates results in there being actually too many mainstream school places. So it's not surprising really that families find it quite easy to get their child into their school of choice in most of Norfolk. Not true absolutely everywhere, but our performance is above national averages in terms of that. Where we have capacity issues, you've heard already quite a bit around foster carer recruitment, is one of our challenges, and the other one is around SEN capacity. So this, you'll see in the report, it refers to the 2 new specialist schools awarded under the DFE Capital Plan remain under view, and as you know already, we're pleased to say that that is no longer true, and DfE have agreed to provide the funding for those 2 special schools, or funding to meet those needs differently, and I know that's going to be discussed later, so I won't dwell any further. Any questions on that section or thoughts before we move to...
Thanks, John.
Thank
First hand I noticed up was Councillor Bambridge. Leslie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 71, sorry, 72, under point 325, you've mentioned it in detail, saying about post 16. Is this because the people that aren't in post 16 have not got the qualification to go on to post 16? Maybe because they've been excluded or not attending at an earlier age, because they need some sort of qualification to get into a further education college, for instance, or for sixth form.
Tim?
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a number of factors as to why post-16 participation is impacted. What we know is poor engagement in education and learning pre-16 is a huge risk factor in terms of what young people then go on to do once they hit 16. Hence the focus on, as we brought to committee previously, in terms of our focus on young people that are at risk of becoming NEET, and work that we do with them as they approach the end of mainstream school. The participation in education is also that issue that we talked about at committee last time in terms of the number of young people that are moving into employment without training, and our focus on trying to make sure that if young people are moving into jobs and employment, that it's also supported with an element of training, which is what then counts as participation in education. And that's the difference between whether somebody is NEET, not in education, employment and training, which is one thing that we're tracked on, but also separately looking at the numbers of and rate of young people that are participating in education and training post-16. And that's what we are pursuing, because we know that that is right for young people in terms of future life chances.
Thank you. Could I just
of course,
come back? And I do remember the presentation, because I'm very interested in NEET pupils. And I should have declared that I am a trustee of Open Road, which is working Kings Lynn, and then from last week also in Thetford. It doesn't say that in this actual document that is the reason for it. So can I also ask about on page 72 the EHCPs, because I think that's probably one of the most common questions I get, or complaints from parents, that they haven't got an EHCP for their child, and I've heard of it in schools as well, because I'm a governor. But I mean, it says that percentages are not met, but it doesn't actually state what the percentages are. So a percentage could be 5%, or it could be 95%. And I would like, as this is a scrutiny panel, I would like us to know what that number is. I mean, I don't expect an answer now, but I think in future we need to know what it is. Yeah, that'll do for now. Thanks.
What we've tried to do, Leslie, is obviously have a performance report which is fairly all-encompassing, without all the detail necessarily that sits behind it. And then when we go to the sort of more deep dive part of the performance, that's when we probably get into that sort of thing. So those sorts of figures, John, you probably got them off the top of your head. I'll come to you, but John, please. Yeah.
Chairman, that could possibly be a deep dive opportunity.
Indeed, yeah. John.
Yeah, in terms of initial EHCP request and that process completed within the statutory 20 weeks, we're on 62%. Yeah, 62% now.
It's better than 5%, which it could have been.
And you should bear in mind that, you know, if we went back to the low point on that, we were in single figures. So I think the lowest published figure for Norfolk was 7% of those were completed in time. Since then, the volume, you know, year on year of requests for EHCPs has gone up, but our kind of performance in terms of ability to respond to that in a timely way has improved significantly, so now sits at around 62%. We did see last year, very, very recently confirmed this, that there's been a slight reduction actually in the demand for EHCP assessment, which is good news in that it indicates that actually our support for the school system and its ability to meet need without requiring an EHCP for those children that don't require one is improving, but it's a very significant number of requests that still come in month on month. But we are seeing that improve, and the number that are out of time scale within our kind of in the system has reduced. So we expect to see that performance maintain and improve going forward.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you, John. That's exactly why we like to monitor these things. I've got Maxine next, then I've got Ed, then I've got Tim.
Button. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's quite tricky because, as Leslie has said, because it is sort of an overarching sort of general thing. It's quite, you know, you could see something and then think, oh, but it's not the time. I feel, but thanks for the information. But we are sort of very heavily reliant on you telling us stuff rather than actually seeing any evidence for anything in it. But that's, you know, I understand that. But it's just for future deep dives and so on. In terms of what you just said as well, I just want to point out, you know, the point you just made about EHCPs and that being evidence of, you know, better inclusion and so on. And we have also just mentioned that we've got a declining birth rate. So are there less, you know, in terms of, you know, less requests and so on as well. So that I just want to sort of make that point. On page, sorry, I just need to take that off. Areas of concern 3.2.5, page 72. So it's just the bit about early years attainment, and that some there, you know, we're struggling there and have some areas of concern. Can I just check? I believe we had an underspend in our early years budget last year, and is that the case? And if that is the case, then is there something there? You know, if we're not spending as much, could we use the money differently so that, you know, we are making placements that are going to either attract or benefit disadvantaged communities, or the communities that we're struggling with the most, that they could benefit from the most? We use our funding in a different way, because if we've got an underspend, then I'm never quite sure how we get to an underspend if it's sort of based on numbers and you know, what we're expecting. If we're not using all the money we're given, that feels a bit problematic.
So the danger here is that we could spend the rest of today discussing early years funding and the issues with it. Up until now, because actually it changes from April, DFE's methodology for funding the 3- and 4-year blocks, so not for the younger children, but the kind of main 3- and 4-year-old universal funding and the extended funding, has been done using the January census data. So, and what that results in is we have almost every year seen a fairly significant underspend on that block. It is an underspend in one sense. In another sense, what it is, because we're funded on an hourly rate, so the funding calculator that comes into Norfolk is based on their estimation of number of children multiplied by an hourly rate. That's how much money comes into us. We then distribute that funding to providers as an hourly rate broadly. And there's some other elements to it as well, which you probably know through Earlham Nursery. what has happened previously, and it will happen again this year, is that because actually uptake of early education isn't the same in each of the 3 terms, and it varies a little bit over the year, and what always happens is you get a slight drop-off in the summer term. So, for example, if you're a family where your child is eligible for funding and your eligibility starts in the summer term, what you might well find is that because it's the end of the year, and children all leave early years at the end of the year, but they start at any point, there are less available places at the end of the year than there are at the start. There's still some, but you might not get the exact day and pattern that you're looking for. You also might well be thinking as a parent, well, do I really need my child to go into that setting now, or would it be better to wait until after the summer holiday and they go in the autumn term? I think both those factors and others kind of have always influenced that summer term take-up, and it's true nationally as well, is lower. So that always creates that issue that the actual numbers of take-up is always lower than the estimate that DfE calculate their funding based on, and therefore it almost by design creates an underspend. It's not, in some sense, it's not a real underspend, it's an overestimation of numbers, but it would be good, wouldn't it, to be able to use that funding. We absolutely agree. The problem that we have is that we cannot use that funding for another purpose or distribute it kind of after the event. It gets at the end of the day as DSG as an overall block, and therefore it looks at the schools block, the high needs block, the early years block as a whole, and any underspends and overspends have to offset against each other. So effectively what has happened for a number of years, which no one is very happy about, is that some of that funding which is sort of allocated to early years, but in another sense didn't really exist, actually ends up as an underspend going into the high needs block overspend, which we're not particularly happy about. The good news going forward is that DfE have changed from April the methodology that they use for the distributing the funding. So they're going to move to a termly rather than an autumn term census. DfE recognise that will, when they've done their calculations, they're allocating 3% of additional funding on top of that, because when they've done that calculation, they're funding fewer children. Now, we know that the fewer children actually pretty accurately represents the real number of children in Norfolk that we wish to fund, and therefore that 3% represents the additional funding that we intend to pass directly through to providers. So it has been a problem. We've struggled for a number of years to work out a way around it. We now have one, and we expect there to be no underspend going forward.
Councillor
Thank
Webb,
you for that.
You ask a simple question and that's the answer. Wow.
I'm kind of inclined to apologise for asking the question, because having to make you go through all of that, but thank
quite
you.
An explanation as to why, but yeah.
Yeah, it's very complicated. Good rehearsal for next week, thank you.
Councillor Maxfield, Ed, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Webb actually anticipated one of the questions that I was going to ask, which was whether or not, or to what extent, the fall in the HCP numbers was down to a reduction in the size of the cohort. You kind of nodded sagely but didn't answer, so I'll just give you an opportunity to address that one.
I had exactly the same thought. So obviously not all the HCPs, our falling roles are in the kind of younger years in school, not in the older years. And the HCP requests, we get peaks, particularly around early years, later primary and kind of midway through secondary as the 3 sort of peaks, ahead of transition periods, essentially, to next phases of education. I looked at exactly that question, because as soon as we started to see the reduction, I had exactly the same thought. To a very, very, very small extent, yes, but actually overall, no, there is still a genuine reduction. the reduction isn't as high as we were hoping for earlier in the year, and we do wonder if some of the noise around SEND reform and perhaps some children not being eligible for HCPs that have been previously, and all that kind of rumour and speculation leading to actually some families deciding let's get the request in. So a bit, but not all of it.
Okay, and yes, I mean you mentioned that the potential impact of the noise at Capital Priorities Group earlier in the week. So yeah, and it does seem fairly logical. The sort of broader question I was going to ask, and I appreciate it's very difficult to measure an absence, but are there any plans? Do you have the capacity for sort of actually trying to find out from families why that fall might have happened by, I don't know, talking to the people that you might have expected an EHCP from, the cohort that receive SEND support of some sort without any HCP or whatever? Is that feasible?
I don't think we are planning to do that specifically in the way that you describe, but we do hear from families in Norfolk with SEND in a whole variety of ways on an ongoing basis, including through an annual SEND survey, etc. So in that sense, we can pick up the mood music of what's happening in families in Norfolk. I guess I would also add that the absolute number of children with an EHCP has continued to rise, although fewer coming in. You know, we've still seen that being greater than those ceasing until very recently, actually. So then, as well as pupil numbers, it may simply we've found every pupil in Norfolk. So even if numbers are staying the same, at some point you might think, having got to about 13,000 EHCPs. Now, that represents a really, really big proportion of all pupils that actually are in Norfolk schools. So it may be that the actual effect that's going on is simply we've finally reached the sort of natural peak of all the children with substantial needs. And although the vision is that you should be able to get all of the support apart from special school without an EHCP, because of the wider sufficiency view, it still is, you know, the narrative in communities that you really do need to seek an EHCP in order to lock in support. And just, it may be the case where we're reaching a tipping point where almost every child where that is the case has now applied for an EHCP.
Thank you. And I've got Tim next, please. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for sharing all of the information in your heads, as well as everything that you've given us in the report. I've probably got a few questions, but we'll see how we get on. I wanted to ask actually initially about the children not in the school register and what resources are actually required to implement that, and you know, will that be funded by the DFE in terms of new burdens funding, or is that a particular resource intensive activity? Thank you.
I guess I can have a go at that in very general terms. It might be that colleagues want to come in and add a bit of detail. So so your last question about will the DFE fund it? No. I don't think there's any specific new burdens funding, particularly around that duty, unless I've forgotten something. There's obviously the maintaining of a register is a very specific activity which officers will do. But I guess what I would say is that the apparatus around having oversight of those cohorts is much greater than just having them listed on a register, if that makes sense. So we have teams that track and monitor and try to contact children who are actually missing from education in terms of actually where their destination ended up being. But we also have a variety of teams providing children with alternative packages of support and assessing needs. The total cost to the local authority of children who are out of school or missing from education would run to many millions. And I don't think, and it is true to say that government is expecting more and more of councils in terms of the degree of oversight of that cohort and the degree of quality assurance of any services for them and the provision directly of either from council funding or from the dedicated schools budget, and the numbers continue to grow. So it is in effect a cost pressure as well as a resource pressure for us.
So
I'm happy for you to go first, and then I'll jump in.
Okay, thank you. I was just sort of reflecting on what you just said there and thinking to myself, what does the council have the resources to conduct meaningful annual welfare checks on every child in these circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and cover that off in my response. And some of this, I think, will be picked up in the elective home education conversation as well, because there's young people who are missing education, there's young people who are absent from school, there are young people who are electively home educated. And so just in terms of burdens, we're not aware of any extra funding that will come with new duties, although we are hopeful. Although there's a number of burdens, as I see it, in the new Wellbeing in Schools Bill on councils, not just around the register, but as Ian will pick up shortly, around elective home education. However, the positive, even though it does come with some pressures, is the more data and information we have on these individual young people, the better we can support them. And that there's a bit of me, I'd rather know who they are and where they are, so we can do those checks. Because I think in the past, I think COVID was a good lesson for the system, actually, how much we rely on our schools and our education partners to have eyes and ears on children. And actually, without that, there is an increased safeguarding risk in that space. So while I am apprehensive about the burden, I do also welcome some of it as well, because I think it enables us to fulfil our safeguarding responsibilities to a greater extent than we were able to in the past. But if you remind me of your previous question.
I think you've covered it, actually.
Yeah.
I think you've covered it, both points very well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I haven't seen any additional hands up at this point, so we'll move straight and swiftly on to the deep dive section of the elective home education. And I think there's a presentation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a presentation now coming. It's very sensitive.
You're so much better organised than the last lot.
Thank you, committee, for inviting us to talk about elective home education. I'm the team manager for the service, and I'm really proud to be the team manager for this service. So you've all been presented with a report, and the report details the 4 areas that we feel are most important to talk about as part of the deep dive, which is the duties as part of the local authority, so our elective home education duties, about establishing the suitability of the education received by Norfolk's home educated young people. The slide deck will also cover how we respond to our...
Is it you moving the slides?
Oh, yeah, it is me, sorry. Yeah. Is it me?
Yes, try it.
I've just tried.
We're not that much better than the last.
Oh dear. I spoke too soon, didn't I?
Sorry about that.
You're moving it on now.
So the slide deck which I'm going to show will cover these 4 areas, Norfolk's response, safeguarding, and the amazing things that my team have been up to of late. So elective home education is where the parent holds full responsibility for their child's education. They have opted to take on the full responsibility. So obviously some parents opt to, every parent has a legal duty to ensure that their young person has a full-time education. Most choose school, but some elect to provide this education themselves or facilitate it. As a local authority, it's our duty to satisfy ourselves that home educated young people are in receipt of a full-time and suitable education which meets their age, aptitude and ability and any SEND requirements that they have. And obviously this can look very different from family to family. Nationally, EHE numbers are continuing on an upward trend. Within Norfolk, over 3,600 children were home educated at some point during the last academic year. These reasons are varied, the largest being for our area around, well, it's nationally, but just speaking for our numbers, philosophically and mental health are the largest cited figures, but that is the same nationally. Within Norfolk, we have a services to home educators team, as my team, and we are supporting families to do the best that they can with their home education. And the team is made up of a range of education professionals who work with home educating families. Within the team, we have dedicated officers for young people with an EHCP, and we also have a dedicated officer for young people who are working with a social worker. Supporting home educators is not just a role for the services to home educators, it's a role for all professionals working with families. Therefore, there is a vast amount of multi-agency working for my team. The number of young people who are recorded as being electively home educated is fluid. It's up and down, it's different day to day. But at the time of writing the report, which you've all had, there were 2,604 young people recorded as being home educated. As a service, we communicate with all home educators via a monthly newsletter where we try to offer as much support as possible in terms of signposting, resources, and always offering the opportunity to contact our service as and when they feel they need to. As a service, we rely on the information that we receive. Where any concerns are raised about a referral for a young person who's home educated, we will follow this up accordingly on a case-by-case basis. Where support is required, officers will conduct more regular welfare checks with families to ensure that they are receiving the support that they require. If there is a social worker involved with a family who are home educating, officers will work closely with any social care colleagues involved so that they can make sure that all parties are aware of the support that may be required and what the situation looks like and how that might impact the education being received. The service also receives Operation Encompass notifications where police have visited the home of a child who is home educated, and this will often lead to further conversations with these families and professionals working with the family. Conscious that I'm going quite quick and you're not being able to take in what's on the slide, but okay, good. So, and then moving on to the transformational activity, which is a lot more detailed in the report. We have just taken on 2 new assistant officers who have joined the team. They are full-time and permanent, and they are going to help us deal with the ongoing demand that is put upon the service with the numbers. We're constantly reviewing our processes to ensure that families are supported as efficiently as possible. We are aware that there is a shortage of exam centres who are taking private candidates for GCSEs. And in response to this, we have teamed up with Adult Learning to offer English and Maths GCSEs for Year 10s and Year 11s, and that's at County Hall here. Furthermore, we have launched a parent forum where we are working with parents to gain their views on what is needed to support them. And additionally, we've launched a student council which will meet monthly to gain the voice of home educated young people, and we're hoping that that represents the whole of Norfolk, so young people from each of the areas. And we're doing this in partnership with Norfolk County Council's participation team. We've also provided additional support to young people in Key Stage 4, so that's Year 10 and Year 11, through signposting to additional post-16 opportunities and qualifications, as well as apprenticeships. That really doesn't list everything that my service does. There is a lot. We've detailed most of it in the report, but there's a lot of additional support that's put in for our families. In addition to, it's just on my next page, we also offer regular drop-in sessions for families and provide opportunities for our families to speak with professionals who can support them with the varying needs that they may have. This is in addition to many opportunities for families to engage with home education groups hosted by local libraries and other groups too. So our question is you've got the considerations on this slide here about how well we discharge our key responsibilities of the local authority and the impact that the council's role in supporting Norfolk's elective home education families is carried out.
Thank you. And I notice, Tim, you're first off the mark, followed by Mike.
Thank you. I wanted to, I've probably got 2 questions, but I wanted to first of all ask about the exam centres. I noticed there was a sort of focus there in terms of, I think it was English and Maths, if I'm not incorrect. So I suppose my question is, what's the council doing to ensure those home-educated children can access exam centres at a reasonable cost. I think that also remains a barrier for low-income families. But you mentioned there English and maths, but what about subjects beyond that as well?
So and this year's offer was an initial response to the increased demand for private candidate centres or centres taking private candidates. The reason why at the moment we can only offer English and maths is due to the qualifications that are offered as part of our exam officer within adult learning. So we're going to be working on how we can develop that offer. It all depends on the qualifications on offer, and we're looking to see how we can open the number of subjects, but obviously each young person who is home educated does completes a different range of qualifications, so we won't be able to offer a full suite of those, but we're looking to see how we can expand the offer as much as we can do. And in response to your first question about the cost of the examinations, that is something that we're aware of. It is expensive. Unfortunately, there is no funding that comes for young people who are home educated. So the funding does sit with the home educator, and so the way that the cost for the examination is just to cover the resource required for offering our exam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a really interesting, valid point, Councillor, in terms of financial support for families. We are aware, I've just had some recent communication this week around a couple of local charitable trust arrangements within the county that will support individuals, and I think your question has triggered a line of thought for me, which is actually if we can get some of that information to Ian's service, actually that's another way of potentially being able to support individual families. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Tim, did you want to come back?
Well, I think we're still on. Sorry, I've got I suppose a more general question. In that, given elective home education has been rising, how many of those children are in fact being off-rolled from schools that cannot meet their special educational needs?
So there is, in the paper, there's a table which gives the reason why families are choosing to home educate, and you'll see that there are some statistics in there around, you need to kind of sort of read a bit in between the lines, but dissatisfaction with school could be related to what you just said. Special educational needs, so a view that their special educational needs are better met in that format is another one. Dissatisfaction with school send is a specific one in itself. If you look at our data compared to the national data, you can see that actually locally it looks a bit different in how these things get categorised in some places, so you kind of need to look across a number of those and kind of say, well, which ones are about, is the school system meeting need, is it inclusive enough, is it meeting the range of children's needs, and to what extent this is around a more of a kind of philosophical decision rather than something I had to do perhaps rather than wanted to do necessarily. In terms of actual off-rolling, it is in the national data, believe it or not. I'm pleased to say that ours is 0 on that one. And we would challenge that very, very strongly. But permanent exclusion is there with a very, very low number as children that be permanently excluded and then do come into home education, but it's a very, very small number.
Just want James to come in, please.
Oh, and Sarah, Sarah's going to say the same thing.
Sarah's as well.
I guess I just want to be clear. So the phrase off-rolling has quite a specific definition, is something that a school might do rather than a parent. So that it shouldn't be the case at all that any school can say, we can't meet this need, therefore elective home education, because that's not elective. But so when you use that phrase, I thought it's quite important to make that point, but I think we would absolutely recognise that a good proportion of that cohort either have specifically told us that is the reason, or sometimes needs that might be expressed there as sort of anxiety or mental health is a reflection of an unmet SEND need. So the true size of that cohort probably is larger. And for that reason, we do quite a lot of monitoring. So when we're talking to schools, trusts, zones about their data, if we are seeing patterns where there would appear to be more elective home education in a certain area than you might expect normally, that might raise us to ask that question. And of course, schools can't formally decide that, but who whispers in whose ears to say, have you thought about this as an alternative? It's not working here, is always a worry for us, because that could be a conversation that's going on in certain instances.
Thank you. I've got Mike next. Councillor Smith-Clare, please. Oh, Sarah, you wanted to come in and I went to James. I miss you, really sorry.
No, that's fine. I'll be quick. I'm conscious of time, and James has picked up actually a couple of the points. But just in terms of the list in the paper, 3.319, which talks about the reasons parents are citing, and they're quite sort of general reasons in there, aren't they? But I actually felt quite sad when I looked at that list, to be honest with you, because yes, of course, there's ideological reasons, there's philosophical reasons, there's sort of cultural and religious reasons, but things like seeing bullying on there, feeling as though their child's needs were unmet in school in there, that actually made me feel quite sad. And I want to understand that more beyond the data. And one of the driving reasons for setting up the parent forum that Ian talked about was to really understand that a bit more. Is that learning for ourselves? Is it learning for the wider system? Is it learning for schools in a particular area, as James said? So I just want to draw, I guess, a bit of attention. I know we haven't got time perhaps to go through all those today, but we do want to get under those reasons much more, because I did find it quite disappointing.
Thank you. Yes, conscious of time, I've got Mike to come next. I've then got Ed and Leslie, then I'll draw it to a close, I think, because we're running rapidly out of time. Mike, you're next, please.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this really short because you guys work hard and you deserve lunch, and it's Friday, so you're always appreciated. With regards to the reasons, and I think it's been touched upon, I never want a deep dive on a deep dive because I feel you drown. But it would be lovely if we could have just a bit of information with regards to the not disclosed, because I believe from the governmental statistics that's increased again, not after it now, but I'd love to know what that is in more detail and what's being done. And again, please, not putting you on the spot.
What the driver is for an increase in non-disclosed.
Yeah.
We're not telling you, but we want an elective home
Is that right?
education.
Yeah. How about that?
There isn't a legal responsibility for the parents to say why they are home educating. So I think that's where that comes up. That's currently.
Doesn't sound like it. Sarah?
Yeah. While I don't know if we can increase it or not, one of the slides that Ian picked up in his presentation was about safeguarding. And since I've taken over the service, I guess that's been one of my drivers is, okay, so we've got all these young people, we need to sort out, the education bit, but are they all well and safe? So actually, I think the reinforced safeguarding measures we've put in place, even if we might not know the exact reasons if it's undisclosed, we are able to check that is a safeguarding risk. Does that make sense? And yeah. Which
it does.
You always make sense.
Yeah, definitely made sense to me. Thank you, Sarah. Ed, please.
Yeah, thank you again. I need to get into the habit of being quicker on the draw because Tim's question, again, largely anticipated the question I was going to ask, and Sarah's answer went quite a long way to answering the question I was going to ask. Just I don't know, try and tease a question out of it though. If you go back sort of 7 or 8 years, can't believe it's that long, but I think it is. John will recognise this and so will Mike. There was quite a lot of heat around the rising numbers of home ed in Norfolk, and that sort of seems to have gone away. There was a lot of anxiety about the reasons why and connections to, as Tim has identified, you know, potentially just parents feeling that the whole system wasn't working for them. It's interesting, I mean, the stats in the paper only go back 3 or 4 years. It would be interesting to know if there was a big peak before, in the 3 or 4 years before that. But just, I suppose, if there's any way of kind of answering this, just a sense of whether things have got better in terms of the relationship with families that might be considering home ed as an option, and you know, whether everyone in the system is feeling sort of better served than they were when it came up 7-8 years ago.
And can I add on or bolt on to that question? There are proposed changes. I think they come into force from regarding sort of changes in sex education for youngsters and so on, and that could lead to ideological changes as far as parents go. Have we factored that in as well? Because, you know, is the heat on or not? But are we likely to see more ideological changes with the government change in policy in terms of you know, syllabus? Sorry, yeah, Sam.
Hi, just to answer part of that question, we also try and get beside parents and carers at the first point that we come into contact in welcome calls. So part of that welcome call is to offer support to find out their rationale at that stage for why the parent and carer might be removing from school. Is there anything that we can support with at that stage to prevent that? So they may vocalise something to us around a dissatisfaction with bullying, or maybe not feeling listened to by the school. There's an element there. The whole purpose of that really early doors welcome call is to try and get beside that parent or carer to see if there's anything that we can do to put the support in at that stage for that child to be able to stay in there, and for the parent to feel reassured that they've been listened to and that package of support would be suitable.
James?
I guess to your question of sort of heat, my feeling, and colleagues may correct me, is that the relationship between parents and our service to them when home educating is strong. But the level of satisfaction with the mainstream education system and its ability to meet need is, if anything, probably worse than it was. Do you see what I mean? So in terms of where the heat is, I think you've got more parents choosing to home educate because they don't think the mainstream system can support their needs in a variety of ways. So there's still plenty of sort of heat in that system. But I think, broadly speaking, our service is really strong to those that do that and is appreciated by the families. There can sometimes be heat around a national debate that occurs around, you know, we shouldn't have home education as a concept. Some people will say it's not safe, it's not right, all children should be in school, and that always triggers a big national debate around that particular issue. Really hard to comment on your last question, Chair, around the impact of further reforms. I guess I would probably expect to see some impact and some families making a particular choice in response to those kind of issues you raise, but as the data sort of shows, the underlying trend, I think, is much more to do with... It was highlighted
to me by one of our church representatives.
So I think it probably wouldn't be a major driver and would have some impact, but not massive, would be my suggestion.
Okay. Leslie, finally.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, and I don't need a long answer. We had a briefing online sometime last year, and I noted in my head that children who are home educated don't have to do GCSEs. Is that a yes? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, committee, we've been asked to review the performance of children's services against our agreed strategic objectives, if I can get my teeth in, which I believe we've done in the first section. We've also looked at, considered the performance of elective home education in Norfolk, and I think there's definitely an improving picture in what we're being presented and seeing on that, which is recommendation 2. Also identify areas for a future deep dive in performance. Now, somebody mentioned what a suggestion of something we could have as a future deep dive element. Ed, it was you, was it? Yes. Was it? Or was it
about the actual figures rather than
yes.
The percentage which I got verbally answered.
You got
but,
verbally
you know,
answered. And Ed, sorry?
Yeah, mine was one I didn't mention because I got so wrapped up in nerding out about SEND policy. I'm always interested to know more about that question of performance around transitions into further and higher education. Would be an interesting one to know more about, because historically Norfolk has been an underperformer in that area. And
excellent. That will get noted, and we'll add that to a potential future deep dive. Thank you. So with that, are we happy with the recommendations as set out in the report? All agreed? Yeah, thank you. Moves us on to page 88 and our forward work programme item. Now, obviously, I made reference to it in my opening remarks regarding the additional requirement for additional meeting, but I'll come to Becky, who's acting as Tristan today, if you hadn't noticed. Well done, Becky. Thank you.
Thank you,
For
Chair.
the forward work programme.
Yep, so the forward work programme proposed for committee to consider is Appendix A, and it's in your reports from 93 onwards. Members are invited to suggest any changes or additions to the programme. This is your opportunity to do that, notwithstanding the 2 items that have just been agreed on deep dives, which will be added to the forward work programme. Members are also encouraged to provide any more details on information they'd like to see in upcoming reports, especially for the 19th of March meetings. The Chair has mentioned and raised at the beginning of the meeting, members are asked to formally consider scheduling an additional meeting on the 10th of February to discuss Norfolk's funding allocation for high needs, providing member input and feedback as part of that process. Members will note that there is a request for a committee member to join a task and finish group that the Health Overview Select Committee is establishing. That's to gather feedback from service users, families and professionals on speech and language therapy provision. And obviously there's an overlap there to ensure that that review is encompassing the views of this committee with your responsibilities for children's services oversight. And finally, at the meeting earlier this week on Wednesday, the 14th of January, the Adult Social Care and Public Health Select Committee have agreed that they want to ask this committee if it would consider putting on its forward work programme an item around the adult skills budget in some form. So that is for your consideration whether you're happy to accept that addition that the Adult Social Care and Public Health Select Committee were looking at until they realised that it's not under their remit to do so. Thank you, Chair.
That really ought to be our remit. Are we, in reverse order, are we happy to add that to our forward, or the committee's forward work programme, even if we're not around to deal with it? All happy that we add that on and take that off of adults. So that's that one. Additional meeting for the 10th of February. Obviously, I think as chair, I've probably got powers to call a meeting, but I would obviously like committee buy-in. I think it's a really important subject. Obviously, Councillor Maxfield asked a question about the subject, and we'll make it a one-item agenda purposefully to look at that funding allocation from government and look to make a recommendation to Cabinet on, from what we hear, as to whether it can be delivered best through new schools, which we've been promised, or whether the funding is utilised in regular schools. Is everyone happy that we do that? Now we need a volunteer nomination, whoever, for the speech and language working group. Are these hands coming up from volunteers? I mean, I have experience of it myself with my own son, but if we've got volunteers, so much the better. And I saw Leslie's hand first, and then I saw Tim's. Okay, well, I'll ask you, just go to Leslie first, then we'll...
Well, mine was to recommend Maxine Webb, because she's very keen on being involved. Yeah.
She did indeed. And I'm quite happy that Maxine does it if she wishes to. And your question, Tim?
Well, I mean, I suppose I'm just curious to see what this task and finish group will actually be doing. You know, will it be looking at investigating why some families are waiting months for assessments, or is it more limited to gathering fairly limited feedback? So I didn't know what the sort of ground rules were of this exercise, really.
I'll ask Becky.
And I'm interested in following it, obviously. But
Yeah,
I agree
absolutely.
with
And I
the
think as a
that.
committee, it'll be important for us to get feedback from what they've done and what they've achieved. Becky. Oh, and James is keen as well. Look. Are you volunteering for it, James?
Well, I rather fear I might find myself talking to it. I guess I don't think I'm aware, or we are as CSLT, about this speech and language therapy meeting you're talking about. So I feel like I've missed something here in terms of the background to how it's been proposed and stood up. Can I just get a bit of context to what's happened here?
Did that come, Becky? That came through.
Yeah, so the Health Overview Select Committee received papers on speech and language therapy in November. The recommendation that they passed was to form a task and finish group to look at the feedback from the service users, children, adults, within that remit. No further work has been taken place, or we haven't reached out on establishing that task and finish group, because the first part was understanding who the membership should be from a councillor perspective. So the very first part of establishing that is inviting this select committee to have a seat at that table, with a view to then looking at the terms of reference and then reaching out to yourselves and children's services colleagues for input into what that looks like. The reports that were received in November were obviously from a perspective of a provider approach. So we received that overview from predominantly the ICB, and what the members were keen to do, which I think has been highlighted in an area here at this select committee, is to really understand in more detail and away from that committee space what that looks like from the other side, so those that are in receipt of those services. So hopefully that's context, James, but happy to provide you even more detail.
And that's helpful, I just didn't know any of that.
The route, yeah. So these routes, they come various ways, and then we're asked to contribute to. Now, I understand, Councillor Smith-Clare, you've got a suggestion for our forward work programme for consideration to add to the ever-increasing list of things that we've got to do.
Yeah, I think this is an urgent one, Brian. Thank you. I know we discussed this beforehand, but I would like to propose establishing an urgent task and finish work group. And it's on the back of previous committee meetings when we looked at the transformation strategy and the possible impact that that would have on the demands of the voluntary and community sector. So what I propose is we do set this group up to consider the physical and economic capacity of the voluntary and community sector, and more importantly, with the savings, how it will meet the expected needs of our communities. Of course, this does affect not just us, but also adult committee, because it's relevant to both, as the transformation strategy arches throughout that. We also have the current capacity to do this. I'm aware of timescales, but with whatever's going to take place politically over the next few months, this is an urgent one because the strategy itself is not going to change. So there is that need for us to consider that. And as I mentioned, there is a genuine need for the voluntary and community sector, with the expectation of them having the capacity to be involved in this group. Outcome benefits, I think, are obvious. They're not just in gathering essential information, but also the comprehensive input from the sector itself in shaping future community support. And again, I propose that the composition of this, or the membership of this group, would be, of course, cross-party, plus external links with the voluntary community sector. And on the back of that, because of the necessary understanding of that, I recommend, and if the group recommends, the setting of a voluntary and community sector chair, so someone that understands that. Thank you.
It's going to be quite an ask to get that all sorted out in rapid time, and obviously, as I agree with you, we also need buy-in from members of the adult committee too. This committee, obviously, we decide as a committee what goes on our work programme. Mike has put forward a suggestion. Tim, you're putting your hand up to second that?
I will.
If not, I would do it from the chair.
Yeah. If you're prepared to second it, I think that's even better. Thank you.
Yeah. So, committee, are we all in agreement that we get that sorted ASAP and formulated in as quick order as we can, bearing in mind the sort of urgency that we need to look at it. All agreed? Okay, so Mike, that's a goer, and behind the scenes we will get requests for membership out to wherever it needs to go, and obviously I'll liaise with yourself. I expect you're a volunteer to start us off.
Completely, Brian, and I think we've got collaboration from the committee, but I will work with you and others, and I know we've got Andrew on board and expertise with John and elsewhere.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I know we can move forward with this.
So, any other considerations for our forward work programme? No, because it's rather full. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for your input, officers. Meeting closed. Thank you all.